The fractured landscape of Israeli politics mirrors the escalating crisis in Gaza. Netanyahu's fragile coalition, strained by deep internal divisions and the looming spectre of a new election, grapples with the war's destabilizing impact. As negotiations falter, a humanitarian catastrophe unfolds in Gaza, exacerbated by Israel's controversial policies and a widening social divide. Conflicting visions between Hamas and Washington and Israel fuel uncertainty, while the specter of regional escalation looms. The governance compass spins, leaving the fate of Gaza and Israel's political future hanging in a balance. Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
In Israel to solidify a ceasefire and implement prior agreements. This move aims to restart stalled negotiations, demanding Israel free Palestinian detainees and immediately open Gaza's border crossings for crucial humanitarian aid. A proposed unique agreement links the exchange to the start of a second phase truce talk, seeking a comprehensive resolution within 50 days. Hamas insists on Israel's withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, emphasizing their readiness for a complete agreement and accusing Israel of delaying implementation and reneging on prior commitments. Israel's response remains cautious, with Netanyahu convening ministers to assess the offer and determine the next steps. Meanwhile, the White House criticizes Hamas's demands as impractical, highlighting the deepening divide and the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza amidst renewed Israeli military action and electricity cuts. The Washington Post has reported that Israel has enacted stringent new regulations for aid organizations operating in Palestinian territories, significantly restricting their ability to deliver humanitarian assistance. These measures grant Israeli officials broad authority to reject NGO registrations based on vague criteria, including mandate the submission of sensitive staff information, raising serious safety concerns for Palestinian employees. A streamlining procedure are seen by aid groups as a deliberate attempt to politicize work and curtail essential relief efforts in Gaza and the West Bank. Requiring detailed staff lists and donor information, coupled with accusations of aid diversions and false narratives, creates a hostile environment, potentially forcing organizations to choose between service delivery and advocacy for human rights. Despite the international law obligating Israel to facilitate aid, these regulations, overseen by a committee with limited humanitarian expertise, threatens to revoke the registrations of numerous NGOs. The move, amidst accusations of collective punishment and the weaponization of aid, raises profound questions about Israel's compliance with international obligations and the future of humanitarian assistance. Israel's political landscape is a minefield. Netanyahu's grip weakens as internal strife and public fury over Gaza threatens to implode his fragile coalition, sparking a crisis with various repercussions.
Netanyahu coalition, already fragile, faces unprecedented international fissures. Naftali Bennett's potential resurgence, by public discontent with the Gaza conflict, threatens to destabilize Netanyahu's leadership further. Internal political infighting, exacerbated by disagreements over the Gaza ceasefire and detainees negotiations, fuels speculation, early elections. Public perception of the government's handling of the Gaza war is deeply polarized. Discrepancies between Hamas, Washington, and Israel regarding ceasefire terms intensify public distrust. The escalating humanitarian crisis in Gaza, compounded by Israel's weaponization of water and restrictions on aid organizations, directly impacts government stability. The risk of regional war expansion, highlighted by escalating attacks and the severe humanitarian crisis. The war's influence on internal politics is profound, widening the social divide. Israel's controversial summit, facing boycotts over far-right guests, reveals deep societal rifts. The Israeli political turmoil has long-term implications, causing public distrust in government institutions and ideological and ethnic divisions. This uncertainty leads to anxiety among citizens, shifting demographics, and disillusionment among younger generations. The constant state of emergency reinforces societal divisions and hinders Israel's ability to engage constructively in real solutions for the continuous crises. International actors, while attempting to mediate, face increasing challenges in influencing the fractured Israeli government. There is a political maze where Netanyahu's survival hinges on navigating these complexes, often conflicting pressures. The deep divisions and uncertain future of the Israeli government directly impact the Gaza situation, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and increasing the risk of severe escalation.
To help provide analysis about the most recent updates concerning the impact of the continuing deep divisions in the Israeli government and its uncertain future on the Gaza situation, in addition to the humanitarian crisis, we're joined from the occupied Jerusalem by Dr. Abdel Nasser Makki, a political science professor, and from Cairo, Mr. Ibrahim Darawi, writer and political analyst. Thank you both for joining us here on Think Tank. Firstly, let's start off with Dr. Makki. Given the current internal fractures, how sustainable is Netanyahu's coalition amidst the escalating public dissent over what's happening in Gaza?
First of all, thank you, and also for your guest. About the government of Netanyahu, I think from the beginning of the 7th of October, Netanyahu is exposed to many, that's threatened from the parties there, especially from the Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who, that's formulated or consist about 13 seeds, and in order to attack Hamas many times. But now I think the coalition of Netanyahu, which about maybe 64 seats from 120 seats, and he can go ahead with his government without any problem, because as you know, according to the law of the Knesset and the government of Israel, it should have 60 plus 1. So Netanyahu has now the majority in order to go ahead with his, the plan. But there are some internal problem concerning, that there is like discussions, and also there are some problems between him and between the national security, especially with the head of the Shabak, Ronnie Bar, because they accuse him that Netanyahu just go ahead with Israel with the political issues without going to the interest of Israel, especially for the detainees. So now there are some accused between Netanyahu and between the head of Shabak, and also the army. There are problems because, as you know, he was the head of the army, he resigned, and he said that he is blaming from some problems concerning the 7th of October. But now Netanyahu is just depending on Smotrich in order to that his government will be sustainable. regardless of this of resigned of Ben Gvir stay with Netanyahu, resigned from the government. So Netanyahu in order with plan in the future and to continue what he want is that he want to make a victory against Hamas and he want to release the detainees. This is something that he is ordinarily speaking about these things
Yes.
always. And I think his coalition now maybe he's exposed to some, that's here and here, but until now he is the leader of Israel and he's the prime minister, and also the American administration even is supporting him in his
Yes.
position. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we could just move on to Mr. Darawi, since you spoke about, the Netanyahu currently being the leader and, the Prime Minister of Israel and in control of what's happening. Mr. Darawi, how will the potential return of Naftali Bennett reshape Israel's politics and its approach towards Gaza? Will it help, I suppose, as well in reshaping the fractures or, bringing, the Israeli political, spectrums together?
In my opinion, Trump has several options with Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's say that the good period between Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump is over now, especially that Trump wants peace in the Middle East, especially that was seen, that is going to be seen in his visits to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He wants to see stability in the Middle East. And he's talking now about the Ibrahimi agreements with Saudi Arabia and with Israel. In this picture, Benjamin Netanyahu does not want to grant this opportunity to Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu today is between the pressures of the far right in Israel and the pressures practiced by the U.S. administration and the loved ones of the detainees. If we see Netanyahu's repeated visits to the United States and his meetings Bennett's repeated visits to the U.S. and his meetings with senior officials in the United States, now Netanyahu is under pressure to go in line with the visions of the United States as Trump sees fits, not as Netanyahu sees fits. We have seen direct communication with the U.S. administration, and none of the previous and former administrations were able to communicate directly with Hamas. The Trump administration was able to do that. And there is an opportunity now to bring back Naftali Bennett again to the prime minister position, and this will be easier for the United States to negotiate with Naftali Bennett for Israel to be an extension of the U.S. administration in the Middle East. Netanyahu, as a far right official, he wants to establish a Jewish state, which he has stated over and over publicly. He spoke about protecting the Jewish state. He did not describe it as extremist. He called it the historic Jewish state in the West Bank and Jerusalem and all the religious holy sites, and that's why he wants to displace the Palestinians to establish the extremist far right state. He had the support of Biden and all the previous U.S. administration, but amidst these tensions and these problems between Netanyahu and most states from around the world, and the complete rejection from Cairo and the Arab nations to the displacement of Palestinians, and this was announced in the Arab summit, as Trump directly announced that he will not insist on displacing Palestinians. And Benjamin Netanyahu is now in a very tough I think Hamas is being very smart in this timing on regarding handling the variables in the internal Israeli front to make Netanyahu agree to a second phase with the US envoy to the Middle East agreeing to this initiative issued to release a US detainee and then 10 dead bodies on two release rounds. And I think this will lead to a truce and to a second phase, especially that Netanyahu wants to extend the first phase and not enter the second phase. He's now trying to get out of all the commitments that has been made during the past few weeks, and that's why he is not sending authorized delegations to Doha or to Cairo to make any real negotiations.
Yes.
And I think the conflicts between Benjamin Netanyahu and the US would actually overthrow Netanyahu. There has been leaks stating that Benjamin Netanyahu failed in the 7th of October and has been failing ever since because he placed eliminating Hamas and the return of detainees first, and he was not able to do either for personal reasons, and this has been established by different internal Israeli circles.
Well, sir, I'm sorry if I cut you off there, but we could also get Dr. McKee's opinion when it comes to this. Now, Mr. Adarawi talked about the idea that Netanyahu is attempting to prolong the first phase, and he's taking a step back and a step forward. It's an iffy situation. And also, what the Israelis have done is they've restricted aid entry into the Gaza Strip, maybe even stopped it completely. In addition to breaking the terms of the ceasefire, using drone strikes, for instance, where just yesterday, at least 13 people were killed in a drone strike. Will there be any sort of legal, action taken towards them under international law, or will the Israelis continue to maneuver with complete impunity?
Yes, I think, first of all, I will just continue about the first question concerning the coalition of Netanyahu. Is there any threat or challenge? I think one of the challenge or two challenges that for Netanyahu government is that about now Netanyahu is try to pass, that the law of the budget law, which will be at the end of this month, according to the the instructions and regulation in Israel. If it is not passed through the budget law, if it's not passed through the Knesset, so the Knesset will be dissolved and the government will be, that's collapsed. That means they will announce to new election in Israel. So this is one thing that Netanyahu is interested, and because of this, he will try to keep on his coalition and not to make any that's problem even with the opposition and his coalition also. At the same time, there is the law of the Haredim, which is the religious man that according to the, that there are some opinion inside Israel, inside even the army, that or the Knesset, that they should, there are the people who are from the religious extreme, they are forgive of not to even to go to the army in order to be soldiers. So there are some announcements in Israel that they are against this, and they try to send messages to all of these people to belong to go to the army. This is the two things that Netanyahu is, that's interested in this period. Other things concerning your questions about the law and Israeli obligation of the international law, I think the Israeli, even the government of Israel, from the beginning of 7 October, they, that practices and they killed the people. They did all the genocide, that actions, cleanings, all things that crimes, war, like killing the women, the children, and also to displacement the people from their land, all these things under the war crimes, and even they, as you know, the ICC, they are now considering Netanyahu and previous, that's Minister of Defense Gallant is crimes war, and they will be, that suited to the court in La Haye. So for this matter, I think also whose blame is the American administration, because they encourage the Israeli, especially the Israeli leaders, especially Netanyahu, is go ahead with his crimes. And many of thousands people of the Palestinian victims have been killed. The numbers each arrived about 48,000 people, and also about 110,000 injured. Regardless, 10,000 or more in jail, especially in the that's the worst jail and prison in the war, CDT man. So the Israeli is not interested much for the international law and regulation, and they consider that they are defeated on their land, and also they want to, and they considered Hamas as a terror group. So this is their justification for killing the people and not restricted to the international law.
Okay, Mr. Darawi, I'm not sure if you got Dr. McKee's messages there when he talked about, the impunity of the Israeli actions. But do you think that, Israeli actions in the Gaza Strip, in addition to the conflicting narratives between Hamas, Washington, and Israel, could possibly impede the progress towards a more stable deal, or even entering into, the phase 2 negotiations and attempting to seal the phase 2 of it?
Hamas also is in a tough position, such exactly as Benjamin Netanyahu, through restricting water, putting restrictions on water and electricity on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, places Hamas in a really tough position in this timing. Hamas, though, is trying to keep restraint between it and the US administration with Egyptian sponsorship. They are trying to accomplish this deal and address the proposals very positively. We have a delegation from Hamas in Cairo. Cairo proposes the proposals to Hamas and to Israel, and advises to take the opinions of all parties, including the United States, not to go to the war again. There is a status of real resilience from Cairo towards the return of war again. Cairo does not want war once again, and it is working to ensuring a sustainable flow of humanitarian aid and to implement the deal as agreed upon. And this is what has been proposed by Cairo to Hamas and to the United States and the international community. And let's say that Cairo actually succeeded to draw a real picture of what's happening in the Gaza Strip to the international community. And the international community approved the Cairo vision regarding how to address the situation in Gaza during the upcoming period, despite the disagreements between Trump and Netanyahu and the delegations going back and forth.
Yes.
Tensions are still rising between Netanyahu and the US administration, the international community today.
They got the picture, Mr. Darawi. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode. So Dr. Abdel Nasser Makki, political science professor, and Mr. Ibrahim Darawi, a writer and political analyst, thank you both so much for your insights, and thank you for joining us. We wish we had more time to discuss this. And a fractured Israel, a besieged Gaza, the impasse deepens. As the region teeters, the search for stability remains a perilous, uncertain path. This brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.